Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. Today, we have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Jolyon White. He is the founder and creative director at 10 Days. Jolyon, welcome. This is an episode we were very much looking forward to as entire team at Sours. So we're very happy that you're here.
Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here. Very excited to chat.
So for our audience too, please tell us a bit more about yourself and how you came to where you are today.
Cool. Okay, story. I actually started out working at Mother, and it was sort of like the mecca of advertising when I started out. Wanted to sort of the creative holy land, if you like, and worked there for 4 or 5 years. Worked on MoneySupermarket, IKEA, lots of big brands, and really enjoyed it. And then an opportunity came up to go work at For Creative. It's a Channel 4 broadcast. What do you call it? Broadcaster. That's a good word. Very great opportunity came up there, but it was weirdly for maternity cover, and so I spent my whole sort of life trying to get to Mother, and then decided that we would go, and everyone thought we were nuts and to have to do this. They thought we were absolutely crazy to leave our full-time lovely job at Mother and head to Channel 4. And while we were there, we were lucky enough, so I was in a creative partnership before, so not anymore, but so when I say we that would make sense, and we ended up being the creatives behind the 2016 Paralympics advert, which sort of went everywhere and was really successful. So that was really lovely. And then at the end of the maternity cover, we were lucky enough to have an opportunity to go work at Wieden+Kennedy, again another sort of big advertising agency where everyone wants to go, I guess, another creative holy land. And it was amazing. We went there and worked on Nike, worked on Lurpak, and got to make some really great campaigns there. And I think it was one of those weird moments where I was working on a brief, and I remember, I think we very rarely do you ever sort of crack a brief where everyone agrees that you've cracked a brief. It often is, there's like, oh, there must be more work to be done, must be more to do. But there's this one time we did it, and we cracked a brief, and the whole agency, especially Widen's, being quite sort of strategically minded, they're not very good at sort of admitting when you crack a brief. And so when they did, we were like, great, and we cracked it in the first 48 hours of working on it. And we went and we said, okay, great, should we present it to the client? And they turned around and they said, well, we actually got 3 more weeks of creative development we need to charge them for, so can you just like come up with some more stuff? And I'm like, but we're all in agreement here, this is the idea we want to make, this is the idea that's a good idea. And they were like, yep, but we're not going to, we're going to have to go through that. And I just remember being like, this is ridiculous. And I think that frustration started to sort of, when something, I think it's like, starts seeping in, you start seeing lots and lots of other stuff, and the sort of cracks started to appear. And I mean, even being at Widen's, which is arguably one of the best advertising agencies going, I still started to see so many things where I was like, oh God, we are our own worst enemy here. We're like, overthinking ideas, we are making harder work than it needs to be, and often like to its detriment. And I think that's where started to question things. And it's funny, I was at the time I was making in my spare time, my side hustles, I was making music videos and directing music videos and having very small budgets to make stuff. And I was like, there's no opportunity for people to question things or overthink things. It was just like, yeah, let's do it. And I sort of ended up making lots of things that not only was I proud of, but like I sent around to the agency and they were like, wow, this is incredible for like the amount of money or the amount of time you spent on it. And I started adding these two things together. And I then started to share my frustrations with my 2 brothers who were also in the industry. So George was at the time a strategist, but he had worked at Grey, Anomaly, and he was currently at a smaller agency called Lagos Delaney. And he shared all the same frustrations that I shared. We then talked to my other brother Dominic, who he's a sound genius, a composer. He's annoyingly talented, the annoyingly talented brother. And he had been helping me with the music videos, and he'd been helping me pretty much. We're sort of a bit closer in age, and we'd always had that idea of making stuff and just doing stuff. And we were like, we said, look, there must be a better way of doing it, like a smarter way of doing something. And while we were sort of, shouldn't say this probably, but while we were kind of in our jobs, we thought we would do a little test, see, when we were working with a friend who had a business, and so we were sort of treated it thing, and we said, look, let's just try and do this quickly. And we just thought, let's cut out the faff, cut out the shit. Sorry, can I swear?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Shit.
We're called What's Wrong with Them, obviously.
Yeah. I was like, oh no, I've ruined it. I've sworn. Okay, good. I'll say shit more often.
Yeah.
I think that, like, we just give it a go, and we just we did it, I think, just over nine days or something. And I remember George saying, oh, we should call ourselves 2 weeks. And I was like, that sounds awful. And then I was like, that's a terrible idea. And then we just decided to go with 10 days. And I think, so that's coming up to 3 years ago now when we did that. And so it was literally just after sort of the pandemic and that stuff, because I think there was an opportunity to sort of really kind of question things a bit more. I think people were much more susceptible to like different things, and I think maybe before that there might have been a lot less open-mindedness to sort of something new. And I think when we came in, we had conversations with people and clients, they were just so open to something new. And I think that I would like to think that had a big impact on us. And yeah, so that's kind of how 10 days kind of, and my background could have led to it. They kind of stream into one, because my frustrations with stuff thing. But I think we try and focus, like, with what we do, and we'll come on to all the sort of fun stuff we do. But like, it really comes down to just like, I think what was missing and the gap in the market for us, and why 10 days almost, I think, has been doing so successful, beyond all the stuff I'll talk to you about what's wrong with the industry in some ways. But I think the gap in the market really was that there was lots of different agencies promising to do different things and trying to be whatever, defiant this or whatever rubbish. But actually the truth is, like, they were just kind of like doing the same thing that the ad industry has always done. They weren't actually trying to change it. And I think, like, what we do is, by being called 10 days, it's implicit in our name that we're trying to be something different. And I think that has been a massive gap. And then we just take all the big ad agency thinking, so all that stuff of where I've worked and what I've done, and with George's strategy help and Dominic's sound experience and all this, and we've just gone, you know what, let's just distill all that thinking and just do it quicker. And I mean, it's funny, I'll end up, this is me rambling, you know, I told you it would happen, but please keep rambling. I think, like, this, I'll stop there and we can talk some more.
No, but I mean, I love this so much, and I feel like you guys are proof that the pandemic had silver linings in that. I totally agree. Like, something happened to all of us, right? Like, whether that's questioning our existence to really wanting to see new and different. And I think that open-mindedness in many industries also gave us more courage to be more bold than maybe we haven't been before. And I think in that sense, you know, we often say, when in innovation and design innovation, for example, the problem usually is not the innovation itself, is all the system that it tries to exist in or like come out from, right? And what you're describing to me is that, right? Like, there is so much that gets lost in just corporate machine. I mean, it then becomes the creative work, I think, becomes secondary to feeding the needs of the beast, which is the corporation itself. And what does that do to creativity? How does that impact the potential of good work, right? And in the end, I always see agencies as like kind of not only just ad creators, but these engines that could really inspire, drive change, and push for change, right? Because like as a more relatively young and a small studio, for example, we could have the best concepts, but without the big partners that can really push for that, we can't really be as loud as we want to be. And they have that power, but it gets lost. And that example you gave in terms of like, we have a brilliant idea, we can't share it because we need to like charge for 3 weeks. Like that is just, it's like mind blowing. And you're kind of like, well, if you get to a corporation level though, is it inevitable? Like this probably happens. Like that's quite a chronic symptom. And like research is done so ineffectively. Like you could do so much more research, but you can't because you spend it all everywhere else. Prototyping is done so expensively, you know, like all these like lack of resourcefulness and creativity almost in the process is getting in the way of so much. And you're kind of like, then why should big corporations ever collaborate with other big corporations? I mean, there needs to be way many more 10 days to really drive that like kind of momentum and change and spark that we very much need. And especially coming from, you know, ad and creative content space, because that's what inspires us. I mean,
100%.
otherwise it's the news, the urgent news that tells us like world is ending, you know, like either that really drives us or where we can get inspired is through really the work that creative agencies do. And yet what you're telling me is very, it's indicative of, you know, our problem today and how we can't really change, even though we're in desperate need of progress and why we're moving so slow. But anyway, I just took your story and exploded to like all industries, all corporations.
Oh, no, it's great. It's exactly, no, this is, I mean, all this stuff is exactly why 10 days exists. And I think we often talk about it as in like, it's like this, it's an outdated process. I think almost like advertising has, the processes haven't changed, but the world has changed. Cultures, the way the whole fast culture moves has changed, and we haven't kept up with that. But I think, you know, in some ways that kind of keeping up with culture is not actually the main it's a byproduct of why we exist, actually. And funny enough, and you nailed it on the head when you said about, you know, what does that do to the work when you have all these kind of corporate functions that kind of, you know, barriers are arguably, and processes that kind of constrain things. And we often say it's like, they, you know, why have you got all these different people in a meeting? Why? And everyone, then you've got more people in this meeting and they end up feeling they have to say something to justify their existence in the room. And usually, without sort of being too sort of think, if they're not sure what they're going to, if they're not confident in what they're going to say, they say something that actually detriments the idea and actually dilutes the idea. And you end up sort of this thing. And we always say like there's everything, not just the speed it takes and its thing, it's just like everything is bloated. Everything is just this thing where it's like, it kind of, when you said about what it does to the work, well, it makes the work bland, it makes the work vanilla. And like, and you know, and we talk, you briefly sort of touched on research and things like that. And I think what we've done is we've tried to make everything as safe as possible. And what we've done is then we've just ruined the reason advertising exists, which is to sort of disrupt, which is to make people see things differently. And I think what, you know, and again, like it's sort of all the reasons we exist is like no politics, no bullshit, no faff, and 100% nothing bland, nothing vanilla. And like we talk about this at the moment, it's been something quite fascinating because I don't think we anticipated it exactly to work like this. But we've got clients coming to us, and the first question they say is, please tell me you can do it in longer than 10 takes. And it's funny that it's not, what we've learned is that there are some projects where they go, oh, we have a need for this, a need for speed. And they come in and they go, oh, we've booked media, or we've just worked with this really crappy agency who've done the brief any justice, or all these different things. And I think what we ended up sort of realizing was that they bought into our approach to things, not the fact we're a speed. And we started to kind of recently, it's one of those things where we've been so busy on client, we've got client, like we've almost got a waiting list for clients, which is like really exciting, but like we haven't had time to really sit down and go, what makes what we do, and why do we do what we do, and what makes what we do great. It came down to this thing when we've distilled it quite recently, of this idea of, it's not actually, we're not, even though we're called 10 days, we're not actually, it's not the speed that's important, it's what the speed enables. So speed stops, and what speed encourages people to make braver decisions, and so those braver decisions lead to more disruptive work. And I think the problem with the industry is actually, the biggest problem is overthinking. And the reason people overthink is because they've got lots of time to overthink things. And the more time you have, you could literally undo you could take the best ideas that have ever existed in the world, and if you gave them time, and you gave enough people sort of interrogating it, it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have happened, and people would tear it apart. They'd find holes in everything. And I think what we've actually learned is that it's the 10 days philosophy is about just making those braver decisions, and gut, we say here, like, gut rules, and like it's just, we're always thinking of fame, and we're always thinking of like, how do we enable, even with Fennel, for example, fantastic client, so it helps, but like, there was just this, we were just like, look, you got to do something big and bold, and you got to make some, like, can't be afraid. And there's not many companies out there that would have done what Fennel did in some ways, because they would have gone, oh, we're going to do this, we go through the different legal aspects, we're going to go through this, like, it's not like we were subtle about who it was, like we were targeting. And I think, like, again, it was like, those decisions is why we're even having this conversation now, is because they realized that to make an impact, you've got to be brave with your decisions. And I think that's where the speed element comes in. So it's been so effective us when we've actually just kind of distilled, and it's a bit dramatic, but we've kind of, our kind of tagline going forward is going to be go fast or die, because we think we're like it's that's kind of where it comes down to. It's like, if you, and it's almost like all the things I'm saying is that it's what fast leads to that makes it more interesting. It's what fast enables, what fast encourages. But we're not actually, like, I don't think we're like, we do things super fast. Like, everyone's like, oh, you must do things so quickly, and we're like, no, we just we strip out all the faff, we strip out all the fat, we just make everything really lean, really simple. And it's almost like, I think it's like, I remember this really lovely story where it's like, maybe it's a bit of a myth, but I feel like I've read it enough or heard it enough now, that they talk about when mother first started, and they were doing some really disruptive work. And they described it as they just had the agency was quite small at times, so similar size to we are now. We are, we vary in size according to certain projects, etc. But on a whole, we are quite small, and you can sit us all around one big table. And I remember they're saying the same thing about Mother. They said that when they were in the early stages, they had just a group of them sat around the table, and they would get a brief in. Didn't matter what, wasn't about who you were, whether you were a creative, whether you were a producer, or whether you were whatever you were. It was just get everyone around a room, chat about it as if you were chatting about a product at a bar with your friends and describing it. And then they would come up with some ideas, and they go, yeah, let's do that one. And it wasn't about, being like, oh, we've got this most amazing creatives who comes up with this great idea. It was just like, more like listening to the gut and going, like, how do we do something, and not overthinking it, not questioning it too much. And I think that's where we come to life. And that's like where, like, we sit around a table, we discuss a thing, and we often we talk about getting to ideas within 24 hours. But I think arguably, if a lot of the time, I'm sure most creatives will agree, you come up with something or something roundabouts easily in the first 48 hours, because it's your instincts, whatever has made you good at what you do now is all adding up to how you respond to something. And also it's how people respond. Like, audience don't, like, people don't and analytically look at through different things or look at all the details. They respond with their gut. They see something they like, they go, I like it. They don't, and and like we overanalyze it as an industry, or the advertising industry does. And I think that's where, and that leads to all the things, like that leads to all the bland vanilla stuff, because that's just inevitable.
Yeah. I think I mean, it's so interesting when you say, like, to me, overthink too, because when you have that much time and you're given the luxury of like even like overthinking, you kind of, to me, you would at least have maybe more opportunity. Like, are you even talking to all sorts of different people when you have that time? No, I don't think so. It's probably just like same type of people talking to each other and overthinking and thinking that the more they like think about it, the more good work is done. I mean, I'm fascinated by like we often see this in more like design research side, where a big corporation or organization would have spent so much time on research on something, and then we would ask something like, well, have you spoke to this community or got insights related to this, right? Like some like made more diverse angle, and it would be no. And you're kind of like, so it's very puzzling to me, where the speed and how to utilize that speed. Like, I think what like we do, for example, like fast pace recruitment of diverse individuals in a research, right? Which something that we don't see in organizations, because if we like, even recruitment is something like that takes forever, and it's all same type of people that the recruitment companies they typically work with will recruit, and it's like probably triple the cost that it should be, whereas like you could really just talk to people from all walks of life in way faster way and just recruit them into a research process and engage with them in a much more authentic way than just a focus group, right? Like there's so many different ways and like how you can introduce speed for the sake of the outcome too, right? And it's not, and I don't think anyone, and just for like maybe like the younger listeners and of this like episode, when speed, we're not referring to just like get it out there, get it done, sloppy, dirty. It's more like introducing that pace where all the where everything stalls normally, so that you can actually create a better outcome, right? Like whether that is kind of, you're so right in terms of like the gut feeling you probably had as all stakeholders who know the company, understand the goal, is probably there. And then how you're going to mature that needs more work than just kind of like overthinking the idea itself, because every idea can be brought into a cool form, but how are you going to do that? So massaging that and marinating that, like all of that that should be more, it's like innovation lab, right? Like you need to nurture the idea for it to come out as something that can like really be innovative. And it's not overthinking of the idea, it's how the process unfolds from there. And we also often say about like process is not talked, like we focus so much on the outcomes and not the process, maybe because process is not that sexy as the outcome itself, but like the details there matter so much, and how you approach that as a organizational like culture, your mindset, right? Like it matters so much. And I think you all, and as brothers, like this story is like so fascinating too, kind of not only just like seeing, but immersing yourselves into all the dysfunctionalities, all these like collective industries, and then coming together with all those insights. That's already the mindset and culture of the organization, which I think is very hard to adopt unless you kind of build in that mindset, right? That's why we have so many organizational like change management or cultural change initiatives happening, which are not really happening in so many organizations, because in the end, so many systems and like processes, those like details, those things that don't get enough attention, the processes and how we work have to change. And as long as we don't change them, how do you change culture? But because you came from that, like you graduated from that really with those like learnings, I think resulted in you having an innovative process and understanding where you introduce speed or where you can introduce speed. I think that is yeah, I mean, am I reflecting correctly on what you're saying
No,
in terms of like across?
100%. I think it's like I think that you're right. Like when you talk about the process, it's not very sexy, and like we talk about efficiency, it's like the least sexy word, but and
Yeah.
it's like it doesn't make anyone want to jump up for joy. But it's like I think it I think it's that's where our speed is really, is like not wasting time and not wasting like the sort of, I think there is, the system is set up actually to incentivize people to waste time. Like the more time they spend, like we talked about it briefly, with taking some 3 weeks of extra sort of creative development, etc. But like ultimately the system's wrong, because you are encouraged to spend, the longer you spend, the more profit you make. And I think that profit is funny. It's like we talk about profit being sort of this kind of, in some ways it's that it arguably is the driving force behind why things end up more bland. And you talk about, because we talk about the safety blanket that comes in with all those different elements, and I think it's all trying to protect profit. And when you do that, you end up servicing a client rather than challenging them. And like I am so excited about challenging clients. Like I will, and some of our best clients are sort of founder led, and I will just hop on the phone and I will just say, what are you doing? And I say to them, and I said, we've got a brilliant client there called Cano Water, and they're the first ever company to can water. And they, even before Liquid Death in America, they did it before them. And I think we have a really good relationship with them, and we're always challenging them. And I remember the first time we said we were interested in sort of, I guess, interesting, again, not being like a servicing client relationship, but like collaborating together. When we first said it, we said, look, we are super excited to partner with you and collaborate with you under one condition. And we said, you have to be brave. And I know bravery gets thrown around like a word, that sort of thing, but we said it, and we put it on a big slide, and we said to them, look, that's the only thing we ask. Like everything else, just you promise you be brave. So there was this moment where we had a project where we basically called out Wimbledon for having Evian as their sponsor, and there was a lot of pushback within Cano initially to do that idea, and the founder is he's got such a smart mind, and he's so sort of passionate about everything. He just said, I'm getting a lot of pushback. And he said, I'm not, he was a bit sort of thing. And I phoned him up and I just said, do you remember what we said? I said, you've got to be brave, or there's no point doing this. And he went, fuck it. He was like, and he literally went, we're doing it. And he literally, on that call, he made the decision, he overruled the decision, and he was, not only was it the most success. So just to give a bit of clarity on what we did here, we decided to set up a helpline for Wimbledon, because we thought that Wimbledon is stuck in a toxic relationship with Evian because of the being stuck with plastic and being forced for people to have plastic at the tennis tournament. And so we got a moving mobile billboard, and we put a hotline number on it that had one message on it. It had you just phoned it and you got an answer machine message that said basically, hey Wimbledon, if this is you, we're here to help. We're going to help you get through this. This is the Cano hotline. We're here to sort of help you get away from your toxic relationship with plastic. Blah, blah. It was really fun. We did the mobile billboard, and we drove around Wimbledon facility, and I mean, we got so much attention, and it was amazing. And I think what we didn't anticipate was that the sort of it created like unbelievable sort of response from investors who were like who were just like, I want to get involved in Cano, and from everyone's just sort of understanding a little bit more now, because there is a big disconnect between single-use plastics and aluminium, and I think there's an education job to be done there, which is what we're kind of working on for everything we do, that aluminium is infinitely recyclable, single-use plastics not so much. So we're trying to sort of like encourage that, and it is a lot better for the planet and all those things. And we we actually found out today, which is the most sort of thing, and I think I'm probably careful saying this, but it worked because they actually, Wimbledon have actually acknowledged that we've ruffled their feathers, and we've caused them. So they've actually gone back to Evian and given them an ultimatum and said, if you don't have canned water by next year, that's it.
Wow.
So like when we talk about like making change and like brave decisions,
Goosebumps. Oh my gosh, this is like amazing.
it's incredible. Like we always talk about like how thing, and I think again, if he had longer to think about that, he probably wouldn't, like he'd have too many people around him that would have stopped him doing it, and he wouldn't have been able to make that brave decision. And so again, it's speed, but it's more just like, yeah, it's more just like, I think it's like, it's more than that. It's just about,
Yeah, I think it's owning your truth. Like you already know it's a problem, right? You see what's wrong, and the fact that you don't talk about it is almost like, and sitting on that information. First of all, for you, it's like incredibly frustrating. Like, no. Here I'm here to like talk about your brand and like showcase your brand. I need to show it in the way that is real. And for the founder too, like, why are you in that business in the first place, right? But what I love about the campaign you guys created is like it shows an incredible case study of education in things and how we need to rethink how we educate in any topic, like in sustainability, inclusion, like all these words that kind of lost their meaning over time anyway, because we overuse it so much. That this could be fun, this could be entertaining, this can be really gutsy, right? Like this can really look like this. I think this is an incredible example of how that can be done. And not only educating people and raising awareness on a subject that very much matters, instead of like in US, for example, we have like a tiny link on packaging that says how to recycle, and you're supposedly like go on there and figure out how to recycle, which like most of the times you do it wrong anyway. Even if you get it right, 10% of it gets recycled, right? Like it's just clearly not working. So more like a way, like moving beyond how traditionally we're trying to educate and raise awareness, which is clearly not working, and putting the brand in a position, like and yourself in a position where you're taking full ownership of what you're there for, and therefore push for a way that would amplify that message, and calling out people, not people or corporations, on in doing so too, because I could see like if a small business is struggling with something and is not super responsible, like because they don't have the finances, like you can see a million reasons of why people cannot live their most, I don't know, environmental friendly self like every day because of day to day. But we already know like big organizations don't have that luxury, and they're going to have to move the needle for anything to change. And waiting for top-down regulation will take forever. I mean, it will happen, but it will take forever. So that bottom-up push, like that grassroots effort almost, how does that happen? And this is such a good example of how education and raising awareness could be very fun. At the same time, how can you drive that bottom-up push that we so desperately need to push for that change? And
entertaining, right? That you have
yeah,
to like, because it's like anything, and I think like almost like, you know, we talk a lot about how to manage how to you know, humor and sustainability, and to us it's not really about necessarily those two things. What it is it's more about, it's almost about how, it's just like basic psychology, right? So it's like, how do you, as you respond to something, like I don't particularly like advertising, in the sense of like, I don't respond to it unless I'm given something in return. And I think everyone's selfish when it comes to that kind of thing. You want some form of entertainment. You don't want to be preached at. You don't want to be told what to
yeah,
do. You don't want to be like made to be feel more miserable. You know,
right.
well, I'm already feel terrible about, you know, even just like, you know, what bin to put in recycling, and do they actually, all that kind of, you could stay up all night thinking about all that stuff.
Yeah.
So when someone comes in and goes, you must do this, or you must do this, it's like no one listens. They're desensitized to it. It's like it completely goes over my head. So I'm not surprised when it goes over just someone who's not in advertising. So I kind of feel like we need to, it's more about, in some ways it's about giving our audience the respect and going, look, let's provide some entertainment, let's provide some humor. Let's we like laughing, because I to be honest, I'd rather laugh than cry. So
but it's also very empowering. Like there's so many problems in the world that is also like constantly changing, like what the actual problem is, right? But then it's so puzzling for an individual. So what can I do, right? Like we keep talking about climate change. What is like a day-to-day action for me? Like, what can I do? Like, we have no idea. Like, so many of us have no idea on how to take part in so many of these things. So that entertainment and fun also allows for, oh, yeah, I can switch my bottle, right? Like, it's like something so much more relatable. All these like fancy terminal, like, are you in a toxic relationship? Is so much more relatable than, are you taking action in the name of climate change? Like,
who no one listens to that. And I bet
we're humans, like we're social animals. Like this is what we like thrive on. And where did we lose that touch? I think when we became corporates, right? Like must have been.
Yeah. And we've lost it. And I think you talked really well. You mentioned about the research element. And I think, we are, we're not against research in a sense of finding out interesting stuff, but we're against this idea of like the way research is set up and 100%. This traditional sense of research. And I remember reading somewhere, it said, it really always made me laugh. And it said, oh, why would you ever want an opinion of someone who signs up to a focus group? And I was like,
I hate focus groups
so much. And also it's like, who does them? Like I'm being really clear, like who has time for that? And then goes and I mean, it's madness. And
so bad. Like you put group of people in a sterile facility with a total stranger who asks about sometimes even personal things, or asks dumb questions like, would you pay $9.99 for this? And when you open this thing, how does it make you feel? Like, like what
happened? And we sort of, these things are like, they are all adding up to the vanilla work. They're all added things. So you end up with this, corporate, like you said, corporate vanilla bland thing, because we're almost put all these safety mechanics in place that stops it. And I think and I think we've got to be, I mean, there's a really good quote, and when I worked on Nike, we actually had like a little Phil Knight Nike kind of document that got sent around, and there's this one thing that always stood out to me, and probably another thing that's contributed to 10 days, is that it says the gut is always more reliable than research. And it goes in, it says, and it has a really nice analogy. It says, if you asked a kid what he wants in his cake and then make that cake for the kid, that entire cake will end up being made of icing. Kid will not that he won't like the cake, it will probably make him vomit. And to me, that always stood out to me, is like, if you as well, you can't, like, people don't necessarily know what they want. And when you force someone in a decision to ask and sort of formalize an opinion, I'm like going, if I got asked that question, I would feel like, to justify my very existence, I would say something for the sake of saying something, because I think that that's what you have to do.
100%. Like if somebody asks you, how does it make you feel when you open a bottle? You're going to be like, excited. Like you want to say something at the moment. And then that goes into like research, which also, like how poorly research is done. Like, oh my God. And also I think we skipped the part, like what you have because of your like constitution at this level, right? Like how you kind of went through all the corporate process and absorbed all that like know-how, gave you an incredible power of synthesizing what you're seeing, right? That insight generation, that's a muscle that does not exist in corporations. There's so much data, and then their ideas and how did they jump from this to here is not even, like, there is no like clear way of synthesizing what you're seeing and generating insights, which comes with like understanding human process, understanding the industry, like see more like a system view rather than just like that focus room and focus group, right? And that is something like, even if a kid says like icing, you can say, okay, the kid wants sugar, but that's the synthesis that you want to make out of that and not create. But that's not how research is done. They would actually like either take it literally or disregard it completely, right? And then you get called out on why aren't you listening to people. But yeah, I relate to everything you're saying. And I think your entire like even existence is an incredible way of showing and understanding like any problem we talk about in the world is it involves a human process, right? If we want to reach environmental goals, if we want to reach inclusion goals, whatever goals we want to meet as a corporation, as governments, as countries, requires humans, and it's very human. And devil is in the details, like all that interaction and bureaucracy and poor way of like collaboration. Those are the things that are like getting in the way of how we're doing things. And you're almost like, you're being the voice that is unheard and like, no, this is what you actually feel and think, but like you're trying to go through all of this, just cut that and put this out and let's like advance the conversation, and reminding us that we're humans and what we relate to are very humanly things. And so cutting all the fat in terms, not only I think like the efficiency part, right, but the language, simplify that, the fanciness or the sugar coating, which we hate obviously, of like everything, right? Like I think in that sense, I mean, very much appreciate you guys. I have to like confess before I go to the last segment, because we knew we were gonna like, we could ramble all day. That was inevitable. But anyway, I just have to say how I first came across. So I'm on LinkedIn. I see this post. I don't know how it popped up on my like profile, but it has like 8,000 shares or something. And it's an ad. And I'm like, another ad. But like, why did it get shared so much? And especially someone from like my community who is clearly, a little bit sour, a little bit like questioning what's wrong with all of that. So I watch it and I'm so fascinated, like the guts in the I'm talking about the fennel ad. Please go Google a fennel 10 days and you'll see it. I think it should have been headlining all platforms and magazines and whatever newspapers. It didn't. Also shows the corporate BS in there, but whatever. Anyway, so I watch it and I'm like, so like, I was speechless and I was like, oh my God, this is so gutsy. This must have been from like a company so big that they don't care, right? Like they have so much money. They've already like been there, done that. Like they're around for 200 years. They're like, who cares, man? Let's just put this out. It must be that, because that kind of like guts, like otherwise, what if they sue? Like I'm like immediately thinking like all these like bad scenarios. And I go in and I find 10 days. And I'm like, oh my God. And not only it's like three brothers coming together, they're like, fuck it, man. We're not gonna and that I think for me was even, I think people who are in the space of like trying to push for progress or make progress in whichever industry, right? It's easy to get discouraged and kind of not lose hope, but like have off days because you're just facing so many walls every day. It was so motivating for me to see that it was actually from you guys and not from a big corporation, because I think to me, then it was like, I mean, if they called out the big clown, like what else can go right? Let's just do it. Like, let's just go all in. Like it was so encouraging and empowering. And I want to thank you for that. Which is why immediately and enthusiastically, I reached out.
No, I mean, it's lovely. It's really lovely to hear. It's like, I mean, we definitely are always trying to push it. And I think like we're always trying to think. So to have that opportunity, and I think more and more now, like, I think if you can't do something that pushes it or calls people out or disrupts things, arguably there's no point doing it. And I think we have that very much that attitude. And also what I love about setting up this, like, we talk about the bureaucracy and the red tape and all that kind of stuff, but like we just sit, me and my brothers, and I guess because we got that brotherly relationship, we're like, yeah, let's do that. And we're like,
Yeah.
and we have that kind of mentality. We're like, and we have nothing to lose, arguably. And like we often say, like, we're only as good as our last dish. Because the truth is, like, for us, if we end up making a vanilla piece of work, we're done. That's it. It's
Yeah.
game over. Because
Been there,
for
done
us,
that. Yeah.
yeah. And it's like we'll keep pushing it, and we'll keep driving things. And I think that's where that's so nice. It's really lovely to hear, and is that's like because it means a lot that we can sort of start really challenging things and really sort of like and calling people out for good, like making it like a statement. Like, I know I've got two kids, and they're two young kids, and I'm thinking, I don't want to do advertising to promote horrible things and do things. I want to make a difference. And so when we do actually have a chance to make an impact on stuff, I'm like, let's go, let's get them. Let's just let's get everyone. Like, I'm honestly, we're just like, who can we target next? There's nothing, we're not scared of anything, because like at the same time, it's like, if tomorrow we end up sort of, it goes all wrong and we get we get sued, I'm like, it was worth it.
Oh my God. And they're so proud of you. Like, who cares about anything else anymore? Like we have, yeah. I have huge, huge respect for that. And I think that's so motivating and encouraging for anyone who's like young and getting into a new space too, right? Like, you don't have to have all the power in the world in order to push for change. And clearly, when you have all the power in the world, your opinions and thinking gets skewed a little bit too. You get maybe too comfortable in that power, and you don't want to change that power. So if anything, disruptive, which I hate that word, but at the same time, I feel like it is so appropriate to describe you guys, could come out. I think it's going to come out from people like you, who really can keep it real and really own what they're doing and just pushing for that change. Also, like, acting way more responsibly for the future generation. But I think we just, like, the entire episode was like a theme of like, be brave. But any other advice you would have for anyone who wants to push boundaries and I don't want to say make change, but at least push for change?
Yeah, I think like I think the best we've got 3 bits of advice. So we always say, like, push things to the edge of madness, because we feel like you can rein it back a little bit, but if you go really far, like, it's much harder to push something if you're starting in a sort of blandish place. Go crazy and then rein it back a little bit, and it will still be a bit mad, which we love doing. And then I think, which has been a huge motivation for us, and is whenever anyone says that's the way it's done, or that's just the way it's done, that for us is like, that is rocket fuel for us. Like, we go nuts when that happens. We're like, well, there's going to be a better way. And we don't even know what that way is. We sometimes sit there going, oh, we'll find it. And like, we do every single thing we do, down to idea creation, to production, to whatever. We have that mentality where I'm just like, no, I'm not letting this slide, and we just go for it. And then the last bit is, I think, trust your gut, don't overthink, and everything will be better for it.
Love that. I wish somebody told me that when I was in college. But anyway, Jolyon, thank you so much. It was incredible. It's been incredible to witness, like, the work that you're creating. I know 1000% it's just gonna exponentially grow the amount of work you're gonna put out there, because it's just inspiring people, and more people are gonna want to be on board. And then you guys will be headlining some important summits and conferences and whatever. That's what I'm manifesting. And if any of these organizations don't invite you, I'm going to call them out on that. Like, this is too important. But anyway, so thank you so much. This was such a treat.
Thank you so much for having me.
Really happy that you joined.
Thank you so much for having me.